have these really damaged women making accusations. I mean, the one I really like, you're probably, the Canadian member of Parliament. What's her name? James Bazan, is it? Is that how you pronounce it? And Sherry Romanado.
Yeah.
Sherry Romanado is having a photo taken with this man with 3 members of Parliament, and he jokes about this isn't my idea of a threesome.
Yeah.
And then 7 months later, this member of Parliament still claims she's tearful about it.
She's a member of freaking Parliament. You know, like it's like, honestly, if women are that fragile, how can we justify putting them in positions of power?
Absolutely. And why should judgments about what is reasonable sexual behavior be made on the basis of these women who are totally unreasonable? You look at the reasonable man test in law, where there's an assumption about how would reasonable normal people behave.
Yeah.
This is not a normal woman. This is a total snowflake.
Yeah.
Someone who is clearly extraordinarily sexually repressed, damaged in some way. Why should the way we conduct our sexual lives vis-a-vis men be determined by how something affects her?
Yeah.
I mean, there've been a whole range of them that have just had me totally gobsmacked. And the fact that people take these women seriously and regard their accusations as serious accusations against these men. My favourite one is Dustin Hoffman, with an intern who's coming in and asking for his breakfast order. And he says, I'll have a soft-boiled egg and a hard-boiled clitoris, which I thought was adorable. And she says it took her years to come to terms with that. Well, what in the hell is she doing?
Oh, my God.
Trying to get a job in the adult world. What have we done to women to make them behave like that?
Well, I can see her saying that's kind of inappropriate, right? It's not very professional.
No.
Like I can, but to be traumatized.
And that's the issue. I mean, one of the issues in all of this is the fact that we somehow seem to have produced a generation of really vulnerable women, and they're being allowed to present their own reactions to normal male behavior as reasonable, as appropriate.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact they're women who they seem to have come out of the Victorian era, where they blushed at any sexual joke. They would rather have table legs covered in cloth. I mean, all the stuff that women used to be treated as fragile, wilting wallflowers that needed endless protection.
Oh yeah,
we're going back.
We are, and it's hilarious because I think it was Heather McDonald said on Tucker Carlson just today or yesterday that this is essentially the sexual revolution in the throes of insanity. That like what these women are trying to do is they're trying to have that Victorian cake of like absolute 100% protection and having men's behavior on complete lockdown, but to enjoy that in a culture of sexual liberation, right? Where there are no expectations on women to facilitate any of it, to make any of it workable. So men have to, men cannot behave like men, and that's fine. That's fine if you want to put the lockdown on men's sexuality, if you want to do that, right? You cannot do that in a culture where women are walking down a public street with bare legs and half their ass hanging out of their shorts, right? Yeah. And expect men to act like these are little honorable, virtuous Victorian ladies, right? Yeah. Who don't even show their ankles. Like I don't.
Women are absolutely entitled to tease men and turn men on in any way they like, to dress as they like, to behave in the most sexually provocative manner, and woe betide any men that responds appropriately to that. Which is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's we've talked about that before. My real interest in Me Too now is putting it in a broader context. And I was really struck by something I read a long time ago, which was talking about the 19th century suffragettes who had a slogan, votes for women, chastity for men. And it was really interesting because they were obviously arguing that women should have, the vote, and they wanted an end to their sexual subjugation and more control over their bodies, but that required reining men in. Yeah. I love that, chastity for men. They realised that had to required controlling male sexuality, and that's over a century ago. If you track through what's happened to then, I think Me Too is simply the latest round in a real crusade to crush male sexuality. And that's interestingly what came out with Catherine Deneuve, and the French actress who was one of the instigators of this. 100 prominent French women speaking out against Me Too and saying it's all about hatred of men and of male sexuality. Right. And no one has picked that up. They've torn her to shreds. They've attacked her on every conceivable front. And yet that essential point, which to me is the essence of all of this, they're totally ignoring. She is absolutely on to something. This is a deliberate campaign that's gone on for a century, driven by feminists, arguing that male sexuality is dangerous and vile and we have to repress it. And they're doing a magnificent job.
Like, we're going down a rabbit hole of, some MP in Britain, in the UK, during an interview, touches a journalist's knee twice, and then she says, please don't do that, and he stops.
But that's a really good example, because she at the time said, if you do that again, I'll bop you on the nose, or made some sort of comment like that. Yeah. He stopped. They've been great friends ever since. Yeah. She's a really nice woman, I think. She stupidly tweeted about this, and the man loses his job. And she's one of the sensible women who's been saying, come on, this is ridiculous. I handled that. It wasn't a big deal.
Now she's had people act on her behalf, because obviously she has internalized misogyny and Stockholm Syndrome and all of this stuff, right, to not have been deeply traumatized by this man touching her knee.
But can I just get back to that issue of, to me, I've been going back and looking at the history. You look at the second wave feminists and the sort of people like Kate Millett, who, wrote Sexual Politics, where she's ripped apart the famous male novelists, the Henry Miller and the Norman Mailer, choosing sex scenes from their books to show that it's all about, this ruttish, disgusting male sexuality,
degradation,
depression, all that stuff. And it's gone on from there. Andrea Dworkin, we had this ferocious campaign in the 1980s, where Dworkin is, all intercourse is collaborating with the enemy. The penis is a weapon, all that.
She even took shit from fellow feminists. She did a speech where she said, every time I get up and speak somewhere with feminists, I get attacked for still having sex with men. Yeah. And it's like, well, you're the one filling their heads with this fucking bullshit.
Yeah, that's right. But see, I think this bullshit, is part of a real pattern, and I think that's what people are overlooking. Yeah. The pornography. Now, more recently, we've got this ferocious campaign against pornography, presenting any. What are men going to do with their sexuality now?
Oh yeah, women are like radioactive freaking waste. You can't touch them, or you go to jail, right? Even if they say yes, you can't do it, or you go to jail. And so what? You can jerk off to porn until they take that away too.
That's an affair. That's worse than an affair. That's a betrayal of the marriage if she catches him with pornography. We have a situation now where we've never had a bigger gap in desire between men and women. That's what the research is showing. More and more women being in relationships, being disinterested in sex, and men have nowhere to go. They can't go. We have a criminalization now in various countries of johns, of men who go to prostitutes. They're not allowed to go to prostitutes. They're not allowed to have affairs. If you have an affair now, it's the end of a marriage. Yeah. I've counseled people over the years who've discovered their husbands were having affairs, and all their friends say, turf him out, get rid of him. That's total betrayal. You can't possibly live with this man. So, and he's in relationships with women who think there is absolutely no obligation on them to provide any sex for 20
Yep.
years in a marriage.
Yep.
I mean, what is going on here? And then we have this young women growing up in this society which presents everything to do with male sexuality
Yeah.
as inappropriate, as wrong. Men are always in trouble over sex. They're in trouble for looking at women in the wrong way. They're in trouble for not keeping their trousers zipped. Whatever it is that men do with their sexuality is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's insane too, because you still have this idea that we're starting to have this idea that it's creeping towards, because right now it would be described as, sexual coercion or like really scumbag behavior. But, if you're in a relationship with somebody for 5 years and the sex has just gone down the tubes, and you tell her, I cannot live in a sexless relationship, right? So if we don't start having sex again, at least on some kind of semi-regular basis, I'm going to have to break up with you, right? Pretty soon that's going to be seen as rape.
Yeah. I think they go near a counsellor or a mediator. I mean, it gets turned on him as being totally unreasonable, and he's not doing this, and this for her, and therefore, I mean, of course, no one really talks about how much that is women using their power in the most disgusting way.
Oh yeah.
To really, yeah. I mean, it's the ultimate power, of course, in a relationship, in a marriage.
Oh, when you have the currency, yeah.
Yeah. And it's never, you're not even allowed to talk about that. I was once, I wrote a book about sexual desire a few years ago and was talking in the media about it. I went to a university and the students demonstrated about the fact that I shouldn't be talking about sexual obligation in the marriage.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember that.
Right.
That was actually, I think, the first time that I'd ever heard of you was reading that article about how you were protested because you said that both men and women should think about the effects of constant rejection on their partners and try to say yes more often, right?
Try to say yes. It wasn't about, lying back and thinking of England. It wasn't about suffering through unwanted sex, but trying to think about how can I contribute to this sexual relationship by getting my head in the right place, by thinking that if we get started, all that stuff. But to me, this is all, I mean, the feminists are doing a fantastic job in achieving chastity for men, in stomping on any expression of normal male sexuality. And yet there is this, men are much more sexual creatures on average than women are. They have 20 times the level of testosterone. They fantasize more about sex. They masturbate more. Every piece of research really looking at sex differences shows this is one of the major differences between men and women.
Yeah.
This lusty, lasting male sexual drive, and we're managing to totally repress it. Yeah. And that's what Me Too is about. This expression, this is the ultimate achievement of feminism. And it has this long history, and no one is. And that's what worries me, that Me Too is seen as this brand new, exciting thing by so many young women. And it's just part of an ongoing campaign.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it's all leading.
Well, honestly, I did say, because I was interviewed by, I forget, Huffington Post, I think. And I decided to do not a verbal over-the-phone interview, but to do email interview, because my feelings about Weinstein, and this was what she was asking about, was Weinstein essentially, and the few women who had come forward in other like Me Too wasn't quite as big when I was commenting on it here, and like my feelings are quite complex, right? Because there is such a thing as male sexual misconduct, there is such a thing as rape, there is such a thing as sexual exploitation by using a position of power or authority. All of those things exist. I think that when it comes to Weinstein, given his character in other areas, I mean, because he had assaulted men who he believed had crossed him, he used blacklisting and career sabotage against people that he didn't like, who pissed him off. So he was kind of a scumbag all around. And so I'm like, well, yeah, I think it's a good thing. But then you look at that, and there was a meticulous investigation before any of that was made public by two journalists who followed a breadcrumb trail of sealed settlements and gag orders and non-disclosure agreements and all of those things, and that led them to find a bunch of these women and
Mhm.
and then so I mean, like, there was an investigation there, right?
Yep.
And there were several, very, 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 very tightly sealed settlements with broad, sweeping non-disclosure agreements, that you can't talk about this to even your parents or your spouse or your counselor. So you're looking at that kind of thing and that kind of investigation, and yes, good, great, perfectly above board. And then all of a sudden, all these women are disclosing on Twitter, things without any, just presenting them just like, and we're supposed to believe every single one of them as gospel, right? With no similar investigation, no investigation whatsoever, and then I predicted, right? Because, already there was, murmurings among feminists about a potential backlash. And I said, all you need is somebody who's going to make a demonstrably false accusation to the hashtag #MeToo, or something like this article at babe.net, where, Aziz Ansari did nothing illegal, but this woman thinks that she's been, sexually assaulted, and she makes it public, and there goes his career up in flames. Maybe not, because a lot of people are actually on the right even, and a lot of people on the political right just can't stand the guy. He's Muslim America's answer to Jon Stewart, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't like him, but they're standing up and saying, like, this was not sexual assault. Like, get a grip, lady. But the entire edifice. I'm hoping the entire edifice of this sort of believe the woman, women don't lie about rape. Women don't lie about anything. I'm hoping that will crumble. I'm actually hoping that out of this Me Too thing and this Time's Up thing, especially the cynical way that people are using it, particularly celebrities are using it, I'm hoping that it actually leads to a toxic femininity narrative entering into the cultural
which would be
zeitgeist.
Great. And people looking at the broader context too,
Yeah.
and seeing what's driving that.